What really happened to the toughest man in Hollywood? Sam Elliott just turned 80, but behind that iconic mustache and cowboy grit is a truth no one saw coming. The fame, the fortune. It didn't protect him from this. You won't believe how he's really living today, and what he lost along the way. Stick around, because the story gets more heartbreaking than anyone expected. Born in Sacramento on August 9, 1944, Sam came from grounded, hard-working stock. His mother, Glenn, had once been a state diving champ before becoming a teacher. His father, Henry, worked for the Department of the Interior, tracking wildlife across rugged terrain. These were not Hollywood people. They were tough, deeply rooted in nature, and prided themselves on grit. Sam was raised with that same backbone in the Hollywood Park neighborhood, where his father cultivated begonias in a backyard greenhouse. Their world revolved around county fairs, church choirs, and childhood soaked in sun and freedom. He spent those golden 1950s days pedaling his bike to the Sacramento River, chasing trouble and racing sunsets. It was a childhood that felt pulled from a Norman Rockwell painting, until the stillness was broken. When Sam was 13, everything changed. His dad's job relocated the family to Portland, Oregon. He didn't want to leave. Sacramento had etched itself into his bones. But even in Portland's rainy chill, Sam clung to his love of the wilderness, to those memories of fishing in the Sierra Nevada and hiking through Wentworth Springs. Nature wasn't just an escape. It was becoming his identity, the very thing that later helped him inhabit the cowboys he'd portray with such authenticity. But another shift had started long before the move, one that would define the rift between father and son. At just 9 years old, after countless Saturday matinees filled with westerns and space adventures, Sam made a quiet declaration. He wanted to act. It was innocent, just a child's dream. But his father reacted with biting realism. "You've got a snowball's chance in hell," he told him. That sentence carved a deep wound. It didn't end the dream, but it transformed it into a silent rebellion. Sam began acting in school plays, and later in college productions. A glowing review in a local newspaper dared to suggest what his father refused to see: that he had real talent. That single line ignited something in him. He wasn't just dreaming anymore. He was going to prove his father wrong. Then came the moment that would scar him for life. In 1962, just after Sam finished high school, his father died suddenly. No reconciliation. No final words of support. The man who thought acting was nonsense never saw his son succeed. That absence became a permanent ache. "It kills me to talk about it," Sam would later say. But that loss became his engine. He dropped out of college, sharpened his focus, and used every rejection as a reminder of that snowball line. Every time a casting agent said no, Sam didn't hear their voice. He heard his father's. In 1966, Sam joined the California Air National Guard. He wasn't dodging Hollywood. He was deepening his sense of responsibility. As a loadmaster, he balanced cargo in massive aircraft, handling the kind of pressure that doesn't make headlines but builds character. He served 6 years. During the day, he managed logistics. At night, he dove into acting classes with the same intensity. He worked 12-hour shifts and still rehearsed. There were no shortcuts. That grueling schedule forged a discipline most actors never touch. He never saw combat, a fact that stayed with him and made him feel undeserving of the uniform. That quiet guilt became the emotional core of his military roles in films like We Were Soldiers. He acted those scenes not just with skill, but with burdened truth. By 1967, Sam arrived in Los Angeles with $100 in his pocket and no home but the front seat of his car. 87 rejections followed. 87. His look confused casting directors. Too tall, too serious, too different. That deep voice was seen as a liability. So he took construction jobs, earning $125 a week, and went to auditions with sawdust still clinging to his clothes. His first role? A wordless extra in The Way West for $50. One day, no lines, just a body on set. But then came a sliver of fortune. In 1968, Leo Penn offered him 3 lines in a courtroom drama. 3 lines, that's all. But it changed everything. Producers liked his voice so much they rewrote the scene to keep it longer. The same voice that once closed doors was suddenly his golden key. Years later, it would be insured for $1 million. In 1968, he earned just $3,800, barely enough to live, but it was the start of something real. Directors began to notice his commitment, his presence, his refusal to fade into the background. In The Way West, he bulked up with 5 a.m. gym sessions. When auditioning for Gunsmoke, he even dropped his voice pitch to sound more rugged. Casting notes from the time labeled him John Wayne's Ghost. Still, roadblocks persisted. One producer cruelly dismissed his military service as playing soldier. The comment nearly drove Sam to quit, but instead, it became another ember in the fire that kept him going. He made a promise then. If he ever played a soldier or cowboy again, he'd do it with absolute authenticity. Because this wasn't just a career, it was personal. In a twist only Hollywood could write, Sam and future wife Katharine Ross appeared in the same film, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, without ever meeting. Sam was a nameless card player in the background. Ross was a star. They wouldn't connect until a decade later on a set in London. Their story didn't begin with a spark, but with time and patience, it would grow into something lasting. In the early 70s, Sam wasn't yet the cowboy icon. His first leading role? A low-budget eco-horror film called Frogs. It was strange, campy, and unexpectedly profitable. Critics weren't kind, but Sam's performance drew praise. Calm, composed, believable even among the chaos. The film didn't vanish, either. It was still airing decades later, becoming a cult classic. His climb was slow. Guest spots on TV shows like Lancer, Gunsmoke, and Mission. Impossible began to add up. Commercials for beer brands cast him as the cowboy before the world knew his name. In 1975, he starred in I Will Fight No More Forever, portraying real history with quiet power. That role led to another in Once an Eagle, where his strength shone beside big names. Sam Elliott wasn't an overnight success. He was persistence in motion. Brick by brick, he built a legacy not just through roles, but through the soul he poured into them. His voice, his look, his stoic energy, they weren't crafted in a studio. They were earned, one hard moment at a time. Then came a film that changed everything. Lifeguard, 1976. On the surface, it looked like a simple beach drama. But behind the scenes, it was a crossroads moment for Sam Elliott. He portrayed Rick Carlson, a man in his 30s who chose the laid-back rhythm of lifeguarding over a more traditional path. The character's resistance to growing up hit home for many, especially Elliott himself, who'd once been a lifeguard, just like his parents. That truth pulsed through his performance, making it all the more real. The movie didn't just perform, it surprised. Made on a shoestring $900,000 budget, it soared past $5 million at the box office. But what made it unforgettable was its quiet depth, masked by the sun and surf. Critics expecting sand and smiles were blindsided by a character study instead. While the studio delayed its release for nearly a year, Elliott took a bold stance. He refused to jump back into television, gambling that Lifeguard would do more than just entertain. It would redefine him. It wasn't just a film, it was his statement of purpose. It also laid the groundwork for the kind of steady, introspective roles he'd return to again and again. Whether it was Wade Garrett in Roadhouse or the stranger in The Big Lebowski. That understated charisma was forming before our eyes. And just as his career took root, destiny circled back in the form of Katharine Ross. They had crossed paths years earlier, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, but she barely noticed him. He was a whisper in the background. She was focused elsewhere. But in the legacy, fate hit reset. Elliott, then 34 and unmarried, found himself working closely with Ross, who was still bound to another. The chemistry was undeniable. On-screen love turned to off-screen connection. After wrapping the film, Ross ended her fourth marriage, and 5 years later, she and Elliott tied the knot. For her, it marked a fresh beginning. For him, it was a dream realized. Their daughter, Cleo Rose, arrived not long after, and unlike Ross's past marriages, this one held. Over 40 years later, it's still one of Hollywood's rare love stories that endured the storm. As the 1980s dawned, Elliott leaned deeper into the very genre he once hesitated to embrace: westerns. First came The Sacketts, a Louis L'Amour miniseries where he played Tel Sackett, a post-war wanderer forging a future in rugged lands. The landscapes were grand: Colorado, Arizona, California, and the bond with co-star Tom Selleck would span years. They reunited for The Shadow Riders, with Ross stepping in for a small role, adding another layer of intimacy to an already rich collaboration. Slowly, Elliott's on-screen persona as the dignified cowboy became cemented. With Texas roots and family history stretching back to the Alamo, it wasn't just a role, it was heritage. Then came The Yellow Rose in 1983. Elliott played Chance McKenzie, the overlooked son of a wealthy landowner, fighting for belonging and purpose. At first, the numbers looked promising. Over 16 million tuned in for the premiere. But viewership slid, and NBC pulled the plug after just 22 episodes. Still, that didn't erase its legacy. The show's theme song climbed to #1 on Billboard's country chart, and fans remembered Elliott's stoic presence long after it left the air. That role, even in a short-lived show, showcased the kind of silent strength that would become his trademark. The call for Mask came at the most unexpected time. Elliott was in Hawaii, fresh from marrying Ross, enjoying a well-earned escape. He declined the audition outright, but Ross wasn't ready to let fate slip by. She made a quiet call to his agent and said she'd get him there, and she did. That decision flipped the trajectory of his career. Elliott returned to the mainland, did the screen test, and landed the role of Gar, a biker with a weathered face and a golden heart. He played the partner to Cher's character, and a father figure to a young man facing a world that refused to accept him. It wasn't a Western. It wasn't action. It was raw emotion. The industry took notice. Elliott had always carried grit and presence, but now he carried warmth too. The man with the baritone voice and towering frame could cry, care, and love deeply. Just months before Mask hit theaters, Cleo was born. Elliott, now a father, was changing not just in front of the camera, but behind it too. He was juggling late-night feedings and script readings, riding the line between fame and fatherhood. The late 1980s saw Elliott stretch even further. He joined Whoopi Goldberg in Fatal Beauty, stepping into crime dramas with quick pace and grit. Then came Shakedown, a tense 1988 thriller alongside Peter Weller. Though the film didn't shatter records, critics praised Elliott's presence. Rugged, unpolished, believable. And then, in 1989, came a cultural jolt. Roadhouse. Patrick Swayze may have been front and center, but Elliott's Wade Garrett was the soul of the film. Older, tougher, and wiser, he was the kind of guy you'd follow into a fight, or out of one. With its explosive energy and swagger, the film earned cult status. And suddenly, Sam Elliott wasn't just a familiar face. He was a symbol. Yet he wasn't chasing just the spotlight. In 1991, Elliott co-wrote and starred in Conager, another Louis L'Amour story. But this time, it was personal. He shaped the script, produced it, and acted opposite his wife. That investment wasn't just artistic, it was spiritual. The result? A Golden Globe nomination and a Bronze Wrangler Award. Recognition not just for the performance, but for the authenticity. This wasn't just cowboy storytelling, it was the soul of the West on screen. By 1995, Elliott was Wild Bill Hickok in Buffalo Girls. The ensemble cast was packed with heavyweights, but his portrayal stood out: gritty, haunted, heroic. Emmy voters agreed. He landed a nomination, cementing his place as a serious force in prestige television. And just when people thought they had him figured out, he stepped into something no one saw coming. The Big Lebowski, 1998. A film where rugs tied rooms together and chaos reigned supreme. In the middle of it all, Elliott, the calm narrator with the silver mustache and the voice of the gods. He was only on screen for moments. But those moments became immortal. He was just a shadow in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, standing in the background unnoticed. But that fleeting moment began a journey that would span decades and eventually make Sam Elliott a symbol of enduring strength, humility, and deep American grit. The world didn't see him coming, not fully, not then. But by 2023, on the night he stood on that stage clutching a Screen Actors Guild Award, the room went quiet. It wasn't just applause, it was reverence. After 55 years in the business, this wasn't a career highlight. It was a full-circle moment. And still, Elliott called it the most meaningful night of his life. Not because he beat out younger stars like Steve Carell or Evan Peters, but because, in his words, he wasn't sure he deserved it. That's who Sam has always been. The reluctant icon. The cowboy who doesn't ride for praise. And even now, at 80, he's not done. In 2025, he's stepping back into the saddle with Taylor Sheridan's Landman, reuniting with Billy Bob Thornton in a gritty oil drama that has insiders buzzing. And if rumors are true, Elliott may return to Roadhouse in Amazon's reboot, reviving the character that helped define his gravel-toned masculinity for a new generation. He's still lending his voice to everything from truck commercials to Family Guy to political ads. One recent line stirred the internet. "It's time to be a man and vote for a woman." Sam doesn't chase relevance. It finds him. Behind the screen, Elliott's lifestyle reflects that grounded philosophy. Despite his fame, he's never leaned into ostentatious displays of wealth. Yet his success has given him access to a quiet, refined luxury. Over the years, Elliott has owned a collection of classic American cars, favoring vintage Ford trucks and a 1966 Corvette Stingray. His watch of choice? The understated but powerful Omega Speedmaster, known for its timeless design. Elliott's real estate portfolio includes a rustic yet sprawling ranch in Malibu, complete with horse stables and mountain views. While he avoids private jet culture, he's frequently flown via executive charters for press tours. In terms of business, Elliott has endorsed Ram trucks, Coors, and Smokey Bear, and earns residuals from long-running commercial campaigns. Insiders say he's also invested quietly in ranchland and a voiceover production firm. With layered insurance policies covering both his voice and on-set injury protections, Elliott has played it smart. The takeaway? Build a brand around authenticity, protect your assets, and stay versatile. It's a roadmap to longevity in an industry that's anything but stable. Sam Elliott didn't peak in his 30s or burn out in his 40s. He took the long road, and that made all the difference. So when he stood on that stage in 2023, thanking a cast he called family, calling his win unreal, it wasn't just a speech. It was a quiet revolution. Proof that greatness isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a steady voice that never fades. If this story moved you, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe, because more Hollywood legends are coming your way.